All right, it's 6 o'clock. I would like to call the regular school board meeting for Wednesday, December 13th to order. Please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Awesome. Thank you so much for everybody coming. Tonight we have in attendance Director Dane, Director Ledoux, Director Kincaid, myself, Director Carey. We have a wonderful board representative, Ariel Castaneda, and Danica is out doing wonderful things for the food drive. Before we go on, I'd like to make a motion to excuse the absence. Why did that roll in my mouth weird? Director Veach. Is there a second?
I second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimous. Awesome. All right. So that takes us to item 1D on the agenda, oath of office for recently elected board members. We have two board members tonight that will take the oath of office.
I think Mr. Chair, if Director Dane could come forward, we can swear him in.
You're up first. Sorry, you're up first, sir.
Cheat sheet. Was there, Josh is there, so kind of splitting the difference.
There we go.
So if you could, more to the left.
So Director Dane, if you would raise your right hand. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Bill Dane, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge
and I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge
the duties of the office of Granite Falls School District Number 332, Director, District 2,
that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge the duties of the office of Granite Falls School District Number 332, Director, District 1, for a 2-year term.
according to the laws and to the best of my ability.
According to the laws and to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Director Dane. Thank you for serving.
Thank you.
That's yours. For your term.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I heard 2-year. I was like,
Yeah,
I think next up we have
Reading Peters.
Director Ledoux.
cheat sheet.
And Director Ledoux, you are in District 1, right?
One, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you. So same thing, if you'd raise your right hand and I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Peter Ledoux, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and the laws of the state of Washington,
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge
the duties of the office of Granite Falls School District Number 332, Director, District 1,
the duties of the office of Granite Falls School District Number 332, Director, District 1,
for a 4-year term according to the law to the best of my ability.
this one is for a 2-year term, according to law to the best of my ability.
Yep, thank you.
Absolutely.
Congratulations, and thank you, Director Ledoux.
Wonderful to be able to continue to work with the both of you guys. Thank you so much for being willing to serve and step up for the community. All right, so moving on to item 2A on the agenda, WASDA Conference Reflections / Board Comments. Why don't I start? A couple of things so for those that don't know what WASDA or what WASDA conference is, WASDA is a organization that represents all, I think it's 236 school boards in the state of Washington. And essentially is the organization that acts as our policy recommendation arm, our legislative arm, and stuff like that. And every year, they have an annual conference for school board members that allows us to go and really sharpen the knife on our understandings of how to effectively do this work, how to communicate, engage with our community, the people that have put us here, how to engage student voice most effectively, how to, manage, understand finances at a deeper level. There's a lot of really wonderful breakout sessions. So we're really lucky and to be able to participate in that. And that conference switches. One year it's on this side of the Cascades, the other year it's on the Coug side of the Cascades, as I like to call it. And so every director has the ability to really pick out breakout sessions that really speak to something that they're passionate about or they want to dive deeper into. And there was a ton of really good stuff up this year. I don't want to take too much time because I got a lot out of it inside the class, but also one of the things I really love is talking to directors from around the state. It really helps me go, oh gosh, we're not so like everybody's dealing with this problem. Or, hey, how did you deal with that, right? And they go, oh, I did blah, blah, blah. What a wonderful idea. Gosh, I never thought about that. So it's nice to really be able to make those connections with other directors and get numbers and stuff like that to be like, hey, can I call you and you tell me what you did there? But I think the breakout session that was most impactful to me was one that I went to that was put on by a district called Sumner Bonnie Lake. Larger district, but a lot of parallels to Granite Falls as far as financial parallels, as far as really wanting to drive and push for better educational outcomes, and a district that really wanted to transition into that higher level of operations and standards and stuff. And one of the things that they talked about that was really the key point for that transition for them was a really deep, thorough, strategic plan that really encompassed the goals of what they were there to do and the product that they were going to produce or they wanted to produce as far as graduate students. So and it's funny, and obviously I come from a non-educational world in the corporate world. We always talk about starting with your end goal in mind. I think I've actually heard Director Ledoux say that a number of times. But it was cool to see that very effectively done. They started with visions of a graduate, like what they wanted their graduates from their district to be equipped with, to be able to address in the world, what that would look like. And then they built the strategic plan, built a system or encouraged a system that allowed or to the best of their ability to produce that product. And then it became their absolute DNA. When they did budget reviews, they ensured that money was given to the pillars of that strategic plan that would, again, produce that product. When they were doing purchase requisitions for, whatever, right? As part of that process, the person who was requesting something had to write down just a short little paragraph of how that thing that they're trying to buy supported that strategic plan, one of those pillars of the strategic plan. And it really invigorated me because I was able to see really how you can formalize a holistic system around a really deep plan that becomes like everything that you do. When it's not just kind of words on a paper, it's something that everybody knows to a certain extent. And that was super encouraging. So it's something I think that we should engage in here as a district. Obviously, there's a process for that and timing and stuff like that. And I know that we're at the beginning stage. I've talked to Dr. M and we're investigating that, but it was just super passionate to see the change that they were able to do in 5 years from a financial and from an educational outcome with that really good strategic plan. So I think that was probably the most impactful one for me. So sorry to take so much time. Who wants to go next? I'll let you guys choose.
Yeah, so it's always a great conference to go to. It is enlightening, motivational, lots learned, more so items to do. So, right, I came to the board as most board members, do, concerned community member wanting to jump in and help out. And sitting here wondering from the outside looking in, saying like, why can't we figure this out? What's going on? Where's the money going? What's happening? What's going on? The most glaring thing that I found is funding is an issue. Not only is it an issue, it is fundamentally broken. And I want to say that just as an educational piece to anybody in the public, anybody that is concerned, confused, anything along those lines. In a conference where there's, over 1,000 directors, I did not hear one single director share sentiment that, oh, funding makes complete sense. Not a single one. It is asinine, and I know Dr. Middleton sent out a note to the district at least about some of like our allocations and what that means and what we have to do. And unfortunately, right, it's not us against anybody. It's Granite Falls against public funding. Right? This is where we get our money from. And even things as fundamental as Granite Falls, we pride ourselves on our SPED program and our education. SPED students are students too, right? Like they need the proper funding, and the fact that the state caps them at 15% or caps us at 15%. I guess what I'll say is coming out of this, I was part of the law conference and I met some really good, I met the lead litigator for the McCleary. And we are going to start discussions on what we can do as a use case for potentially moving forward with better SPED funding. So early ideas, early thoughts. I'm glad I have another at least 2 years to work in this, because anybody that's worked in the legal space knows that this isn't going to happen in setting expectations. It's not going to be like come January 1st, we're going to have this amazing thing. But there is opportunity out there. On a different note, more abstract, I'm still trying to figure out the best way to apply this, but it was very intriguing and interesting. There was a speaker that was at one of the main lunch presentations, Kyle Sheely. He's an everything guy. Like he does everything. But I went to his more personal talk, and he had his session was called Thinking Inside the Box. And it was one of the more intriguing ways that I've heard, because everybody talks about thinking outside the box. We got to think outside the box to solve this problem. And he said, well, the problem with that is thinking outside the box is actually so freaking easy. If your boss comes to you and says, hey, Peter, you have a $2,000 budget and you have 5 days to get this project done. Well, thinking outside the box to me going, what if I had $10,000 and 3 weeks to get it done? Mm-hmm. Right? The box is a very important thing. We have confines that we have to work within, and boxes actually breed resilience and creativity. And so we really, it's challenging me. Like I said, it's more abstract. I don't have any immediate actions coming out of it, but it's something that I'd like to bring up just to everybody at large we have to recognize the constraints that we have in place. And we can't just keep complaining about those constraints. We have to work within that box, and we have to find the best way to do that. So those were all my high level thoughts coming out of the conference. Some action to take, some pontification, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so This is my first conference, and they start off new directors with an onboarding process. It helps you learn a little bit about the RCWs and the pathway that directors get to work together as a group to help guide the school districts, what our role is and responsibility as individuals, and just really emphasizing that, you know, we're a part of a body, not individuals as directors. So when decision processes are done, we do it as a group. And you know, we're pretty strictly governed by the RCWs, it was a great learning day. I get to spend the day with Paris in our classes. And then hats off to the people who facilitated that conference, because there was a diverse span of educational opportunities for all the directors. I focused most of my time on listening and learning about diversity in school districts and how school districts are challenged with the aspects of changing environments, changing mentalities, and then kind of the overall aspect of mental health issues in school. There were some great classes on that, trying to work with our students. And again, a change in environment is much different than when I went to school, much different than when my children went to school. And so it was awesome. It gave me at least starting points on things to look at to help guide our district, and also kind of some ideas about what I will be looking for in the new superintendent, and how the new superintendent will help structure the district policy protocols around supporting all students and every diverse group that we have, because we have a ton of them, and a lot of them get overlooked. I think some of them don't get the support they need, and I have like the beginning of the education now, and I look forward to more.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I didn't get the chance to go to the WASDA conference this year, because I started a new job, and I was chin deep in report cards and parent teacher conferences. So I was busy doing that. So I don't have any reflections for that to go over. But I did go last year, and I can just say that there's a lot of great learning opportunities there. I just wanted to say to everyone right now, if you know a teacher, hug a teacher right now, because the last 2 weeks are some of the hardest weeks of the year. The kids are wild wherever you are, regardless of if you have behaviors in your classroom or not. Kids are ready for Christmas break, and it's a challenge. So hug a teacher. And I just wanted to say Merry Christmas as my family celebrates Christmas, and happy holidays to those who celebrate other holidays. And, yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Ariel, I know that you didn't go to WASDA and you were on vacation and all of that stuff, but do you have anything from the schools that you're from Crossroads you want to talk about, or anything that's on your heart to share? That's completely fine. You still got fun, I'm sure, and dancing in your head. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, let's move on then to item 3A, Superintendent Report, presented by Dr. Josh Middleton. You want to go take it away, Dr. M?
All right, and thank you. And good evening. And I have 5 things I want to share with you this evening. The first one is one of our themes this year has been on student attendance. And we were contacted by our ESD, which is an educational service district, and we're part of the Northwest Educational Service District. And they are recognizing that schools across not only our ESD, but across the state are struggling, that attendance is down. So we're not alone in that. And so they are providing support to districts with an attendance liaison. And this does not mean that they take the place of our front office, our attendance clerks, um, our administrators, our teachers, or district office. But this is one more set of eyes that will be working with our district to provide interventions when needed, to provide certain protocols for our community engagement boards. This is just a great opportunity for us to help improve our attendance. This is a grant-funded position, and it's not full-time. Our person would be working with a number of districts, but it's funded at least through this year. They're optimistic for it being funded through 24-25, and it is an ESD employee. It's not our employee, but they will be providing, again, some service directly to our employees or our engagement boards, as well as to families. That's the first thing I wanted to share. The second has to do with our legislature, which will be having a shorter session upcoming. And yesterday I sat in on the quarterly Zoom call with Chris Reichdahl, the state superintendent of schools. And then today I was at an ESD Zoom talking about some of the funding initiatives. And a couple things that came out is because this is a shorter session, there won't be any bills that will overhaul any programs or really add any new initiatives. It's really a matter of tweaking. But a couple of things that did come up was that they brought up funding as a percentage of state expenditures. And pre-McCleary, education accounted for 46% of the state budget. At McCleary, 52%, and now six years later, it's back down to 44%. And one of the points that was made today at the ESD was that who cares what that percentage is? The question is it fully funding education in our state? And the answer clearly is no. So a couple of initiatives that will be coming up. One has to do with special education. And again, this is a statewide issue of being underfunded. And if you remember at the last session, there was an increase from 13.5 to 15% in terms of funding. The governor's recommendation is to move that from 15% to 17.5%. And certainly that would help us, but we're still not fully funded. And so I'm hopeful that maybe at our January meeting, we can talk about this a little bit more, because I think having a position letter and statement from the board to our legislators would be important to say, okay, yes, 17.5 would be some progress, but we still have issues, we still have concerns. A couple of other issues, or not issues, but a couple of other items in the governor's budget certainly have to do with construction needs and facilities. There's also, when it comes to bonds, there are members in the legislature who are interested in moving that from when it comes for approval of bonds, from that supermajority down to a simple majority or maybe 55% approval. So there's discussion there. And there certainly is emphasis on increasing the amount of support for behavioral and mental health. And that would probably be distributed through the ESDs. And we benefit from that as well. So there's a lot of talk on some of those issues. There is one other topic, and that has to do with paraeducators and looking at some of their wages. But when it comes down to it, I'm hopeful that we, or you as a board, And me as the agent of the board can communicate with the legislature that special education would make such a difference if that funding were improved. That's my second item. Third item, we like to talk about safety each month. And really, this is just an acknowledgement. Just want to give a huge shout out to the fire department, our EMTs, the sheriff's department, and city offices. They are so quick to respond and help assess situations, provide technical support, supply, uh, any sort of safety support and medical support and all of that. They're always a phone call away. And I believe that we have safe schools because of these relationships. Safe schools, that doesn't mean we're going to go incident free, but when incidents do occur, it's not due to negligence. It would be by accident or by a student choice, but we have great partners who come and help us right away. Fourth is our food drive, of course, is going on. And I know that if any of you have time to make any deliveries tomorrow, they would be happy to have additional drivers to make some deliveries. So you can reach out to the folks over there at the high school if you'd like to be involved in that. And then the last thing is our first edition of Money Monday Matters was released this last Monday. Marshall and I and Melanie have spent a little bit of time talking about how can we help educate our community and our staff members even on the complexity of school funding in the state of Washington. And so we've developed an outline for 5 podcasts, video podcasts, where Marshall and I will be talking about a certain topic. The first one on this last Monday was simply an overview of all the different funds or we call buckets of funding for our district. And we'll go into each of those buckets a little bit more. Our next podcast will be in January, and we'll spend a lot of time just talking about the general fund, since that's where most of our funding is focused, and that's where we receive our funding. So just a thank you to Melanie and Marshall for help developing and producing that, and we're excited about that. We hope that just to get the word out to our community on what that really looks like. So that's my report. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer any that you might have.
Any questions? Questions? All right. Thank you so much, Dr. M. Appreciate the wonderful report there.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item 3B, budget update and forecast prepared by Marshall. So typically here with prepared reports, we ask some questions if there are any. I don't know, Marshall, you did a really good job, and I'll wait for the presentation to get pulled up here. But do you want to hit the kind of just an overview of the goals, how we're working towards the goals? And
I can flip through the slides like in maybe 5 minutes.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah.
You guys can ask questions.
I'm good with that. You guys good with that? Yep.
Computers, I have notes here too. Sure. That works. Ready for me?
Yeah, you can, here, give me 2 seconds, sorry.
Okay.
I can't go.
The arrow key or the
arrow key to the.
There we go. Okay, so back when we developed our budget, and we had a lot of study sessions about how we are going to address our diminishing fund balance. We kind of developed a plan and talked about some goals we had for this year in order to get to that 7% fund balance this year and 10% the following year. And during that process, it was made abundantly clear that let's develop some tracking metrics and let's report back to the board, reasonably short period into the year and talk about how we're doing and where we're going and what's going well, what's not going well, and kind of all those things. And kind of to summarize some of the goals we put in place to try and significantly increase our fund balance was to monitor enrollment to ensure appropriate staffing, to optimize the K-3 class size, to optimize secondary class sizes, monitor and reduce extra hours, meaning, you know, overtime and hours that aren't initially programmed in somebody's contract, reduce district-wide support costs, reduce paraeducators to better align with neighboring districts and to recommendations from the WASA committee that came in and audited us, contain escalating special education costs, and then the bottom line, achieve a 7% fund balance by the end of this school year, 23-24, and a 10% by the end of 24-25. So enrollment, going to try and kind of breeze through this. We missed our projection by about 29 FTE, equates to about $300,000 in revenue. We saw that coming during the summer, and we were able to react to it. And we had open positions that we held open until first count happened and we saw kids in the schools. And in doing so, we were able to appropriately react and not hire 3 open positions at the elementary schools. And so that pretty much a wash. Through the first quarter, through December, we're at 20.6% special ed. A little better than we were doing last year, but primarily the pre-K numbers, they grow pretty significantly in the second half of the school year. So we'll probably see an increase in pre-K, and we'll probably end up somewhere in those low to mid 21% range.
Marshall, can I just pause you for a
Yeah.
second? And I don't want to belabor the point, but I guess I just want to, because I had someone in the community once say, oh, well, you know, the district, you know, you guys are losing students. I guess I just want to make the point because you have the slide up. We grew,
We
right?
definitely,
And we are still growing
yes.
pretty quickly. Actually, one of the fastest growing districts in Snohomish County. However, when we set our budget, it was off. We were a little, I guess, a little bit more aggressive on what we thought that student count would be. And the reason why that of us trying to be conservative yet aggressive is so that we can hire enough teachers, right, prior to the start of the school year to be able to have reasonable class sizes. So I guess the only 2 points I just want to put a pin in is that we grew, and that the reason why we have to kind of educatively guess is so that we make sure that we have enough, obviously, enough educators here to be able to provide education for the students. So,
And I will say it's very stressful for the buildings because enrollment or disenrollment from a school district, or when a kid moves from one district to another, it requires action by the other school district or the parent. We don't know about it until the other school district or the parent essentially notifies us. So we see kids that are enrolling during the summer. We see that happening very quickly during the summer. And, you know, as of August 15th, we're probably showing that we're at 2,360 kids.
Yeah.
Because all the move-ins have already enrolled because, hey, we moved here, or parents know they need to enroll. The kids that have moved out of the area and into a neighboring town or out of the state, we don't often receive notification of that until the first day of school happens. So the buildings are very stressed because they think all these kids are going to show up, and we're holding back hiring a couple of teachers because we don't think they're going to show up. And so it's always a bit of a balancing act there too. And it is a very stressful time for the buildings, those last kind of 2 weeks of August, where enrollment looks like it's going to be huge. And it kind of erodes a little bit as we find out the kids that have moved out of state or out of our community.
yeah. So because there's been a lot of articles in the paper recently about school districts, Washington State losing. I think this past count, they are finally up a little bit, but we have the opposite problem in Granite Falls. We're looking years out and we're seeing not being able to have enough space for all of the growth that we're experiencing here specifically, which is, you know, a challenge, but a challenge I would accept rather than the opposite.
It's a better problem.
It's a better problem to have. Very well said. So sorry, I don't want to belabor that point. I just want to pick that up.
Enrollment drives everything. So spending a few minutes on enrollment is fantastic. And as Director Carey mentioned, last year we were at 2,224 students. We budgeted for 2,292. We ended up in December, we're at 2263. We've actually climbed every month, so we'll probably continue to climb throughout the school year. But we saw it coming, so we were able to pivot and react to it. Those are one of the things that you can kind of see coming, predict, and react to, because we're used to it, we're nimble in that way, and something we're actually pretty good at. So our second goal is to better align K-3 class size. So there's back in 2017-ish, there was a rule that K-3 would be funded at 17-1, and you had to have, to get that to the full funding, you had to be at 17-1 or less. If you came in at 17.1-1, 17.2-1, 17.5-1, they would actually reduce your funding because you're not at 17-1. So ideally, and this includes all teachers in the K-3 level. So if it's a PE teacher, or if it's a special ed teacher, or if it's a first grade teacher, they all count towards this K-3. So you may have class sizes of 21, but because you have 6 specialists that serve the K-3 band, and because you have special ed teachers, that reduces the overall K-3 wide class size to 17-1, one teacher to every 17 students. We weren't that good at that. It became, in 2021, it was get there, report on it, but you don't have to, you're not being deducted for, your apportionment's not being reduced. 21, 22, and 22, 23, if you weren't there, your apportionment got reduced. So we weren't great at it because our contract language was a little challenging around how we do our specials, PE, library, those kind of things. So we worked really hard this summer with the buildings and with the specialist group to try and get it closer to 17-1. And all the numbers you see here are the formal numbers. They come out mid-year. So in 22-23, we're 16.27. This year, we're at 16.9. About as close to perfect as you can get. And you can see other districts, they all, back in 2023, they all tried to get as close to 17 as possible, because that's kind of the optimum way to build a class size that's reasonable and to get the maximum amount of funding. So by balancing our class sizes a little better at the elementary school, we did do that, and we are saving about $250,000. We also wanted to better align our secondary class size to what the funding model is and to what contract language is. So in 22-23, middle school was 25.2, high school was 21.8, and Crossroads was 15.4. 23-24, we're at 27.6 and 19.5. The middle school and high school are funded at about 28-1. Contract language allows for 32-1. Crossroads, a little bit different funding model, but it's similar to the 28-1. So we were able to, using people that had retired and had moved on to other jobs, we were able to not hire a few positions and then optimize class sizes a little bit. Still probably the smallest class sizes in our region and a great experience for students, but much closer to the funding model. And that was able to reduce our cost by about $900,000. So this is kind of a busy slide, and I hope you guys looked at it a little bit in your packet, but monitor and reduce extra hours. So we are monitoring extra hours monthly, doing reports monthly, and just to kind of sum it up, this slide compares last year's dollars spent on extra hours versus this year's, and we're saving in total $63,000 through the first 3 months. So we're doing a really good job of reducing extra hours. Where we're seeing a little bit of an increase is overload, but I guess that's kind of to be expected when you're trying to optimize class sizes. And we're working monthly with the buildings to try and balance class sizes as they move into different quarters to reduce the overload. We wanted to reduce district-wide administrative costs, so we reduced one administrator, we reduced one supervisor, we reduced one, I'm calling it a TOSA. It was kind of it was treated as a TOSA, it was a behavior specialist. And we wanted to reduce paraeducators. We were not successful with that. Our total para hours last year was about 75,000 hours. Our total para hours this year are our forecast to be 74,000 hours. That's probably going to go up as the year increases, as we have student needs identified. So there's been no real reduction in para hours, and we're still daily receiving overwhelming requests for more para time at the buildings, primarily elementary school. The big one, and the one that feels somewhat difficult to control, is special education costs. You know, a student moves into our district, has high needs. We're required to serve them, even if the state doesn't give us a nickel more to serve them. We have quite a few really high cost students. We're missing, we're about $940,000 over last year's special education. When we ended the year, we thought we were going to reduce special ed this year in the budget. We've actually increased it. So we're missing by, $1.5 million in special ed from budget. It's really the only negative to what's going on in the district right now, as far as our goals. But I guess I would argue that it's really difficult when you have kids that move in that require one-to-one nurses. They have a special condition that requires them to have a nurse within, 5 feet of them at all times. And that nurse costs $150,000, and not much you can do about it. Or when you have a student that has a medical condition that requires a paraeducator to be right next to them at all times. Or when you have a student that can't be served here and can't even be served in the state, has to be served at a special program outside of the state, we're still required to pay for that. So kind of digging into this a little bit, we have what looks like about 8 to 10 kids that cost about $1.3 million to serve. And some of that is having to serve them out of state in special institutions out of state. Some of that is exceptional medical requirements. And, I guess I would, talking about the increase of the cap of the legislative, so that the governor's budget asks for it to be at 0.25%. OSPI asks that the cap be removed altogether. They both sent those proposals to the legislature. If the cap were increased to 17.25, that means about $550,000 extra for Granite Falls. If the cap were removed altogether, that would be about $1.5 million. And, I guess I would argue we don't have much control that when a student moves in with really high needs, and then the state doesn't pay you anything to help serve that student, it's difficult. Moving on to the next one.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm literally sitting here biting my tongue, but I can't help it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Not to get on my soapbox, I'll make this quick. There's many parts about school funding, as Director Ledoux referred to earlier, that make no sense to me. Sped funding is probably at the top. And I guess, let me just say this, right? Public education, I am passionate about public education, as I know and no more so than anyone up here. Our passion for this community and for the kids and the families that we serve is the reason why I know all of us sit up here. And public education should be the one thing in our society that cuts through socioeconomic status, cuts through everything. A kid shows up, or a family moves into the town, a kid shows up, and we should educate that kid and meet them where they're at and grow them and give them whatever they need. That is the system. That's the way it should work. That is absolutely what we're doing. The fact that can happen and the state can go, well, we're not paying for that. I'm sorry, you're at your cap, like as if we have some magical control about a kid that moves in that has seizures and that could at any point have a seizure and pass away. And because of that, because we are required to meet that kid's needs, we hire a nurse because that is the right thing to do. And that is the absolute thing that we should do. And the state just goes, it is unconscionable to me. I try hard in all of my iterations of talking to legislators to like really try to like mentally understand how we can exist in a system, especially in the state of Washington, which I would say is pretty or I guess advertises itself as pretty progressive in a lot of areas, to allow something like this to happen. And you know, I don't these kids deserve every single support that they need to be able to meet their full potential, right? We believe in kids and we believe and expect success, right? But help us, right? Like, I mean, we don't have economies of scale. We're a small school district. I just don't understand how this allows to happen. And so when, you know, there's a lot of conversation about our finances and the stuff like this, with people in the community, and rightfully so. We are elected people and we are accountable to the people of this community. This is one of the areas where I speak to someone and they can't even fathom what I'm saying. I'm like, yeah, do you know that? Do you know that we pay, you know, out of the general fund, what we pay for teachers, keeps the light on, all these things, you know, we're $1.5 extra million over what the state gives us just in this one area. That's not fixing the school board, you know, that's not doing any of that other stuff. And I talk about it a lot because when I have that conversation and I can actually catch someone that's actually like listening and processing what I'm saying, I could see the light coming on their eyes in the really challenging arena that we operate in as educators in a large part of really trying to grow and support our community. And this is a challenge that we can, I mean, we're moving forward and we'll do what needs to be done. But I guess sorry, I couldn't let you go past without just pouring my heart out about this because it breaks my heart every time it comes up. So
This was something that came up, and once again, the more that I'm learning of funding, it's written that school funding or funding public schools is of paramount importance, right? And when we look in legal jargon, everything can be misconstrued. Paramount was also then subsequently very clearly identified as of top importance. It is the priority. So that means above all else. Now, what the state is actively doing is they are choosing to forego paramount. They are choosing when you drive down, and these are just off the top of my head as I see, as you're driving down 405 5 years ago, and you see the big sign that says $360 million restriping project. When you go into Lacey and you see a $34 million bridge painting project, the state is actively choosing to put funds there above the area of paramount importance. And so I want that to be very clear. I or nobody up here has a special badge to go down into Olympia and be heard by anybody. Every single person that is listening to this right now has the exact same power, is on equal footing to let the legislature know that this is unacceptable. So that is my call to say, right, and it was what was so abundantly clear to me in the conference this year was it's not, people aren't quietly going around the conference being like, oh my God, can you believe that we're not funded? Everybody's like, this is insane. There's a conference of thousands of people here saying, why is the state putting money into areas when it explicitly says by the law that it should be going to the school districts? And the state's effective response is, our doors are here. You can hand us a lawsuit if you want to. So I want you to know, I want everybody to know what we are dealing with. And the fact is, like I said, we don't have a special badge either. We're here to help. We're here to educate. We're here to learn. We're here to listen. But it is by far the most frustrating thing in the world that we have a cap, that money is not going where it should be. Right? We have people that do amazing jobs in these districts that we want to pay, but anybody that runs a household has a budget. Money has to come from somewhere, and there are districts that are nearby that are hurting in that budget, and they have no line of sight into where they're going to get money from. So not to step on the soapbox even further, but I just wanted to make sure that that is known, because I feel like it's such an unknown entity of like, well, the schools get a ton of money as it is. if we are not getting enough, if we as communities are not getting enough funding, and we're not the only ones, it's pretty much everybody. If we're not getting enough, it is the state's duty and responsibility to do that. It even says that in the language that is written up in the RCWs and everything. So just be very abundantly clear on that. It is, frustrating to say the least.
Just to pile on a little bit, I didn't know that the McCleary people were starting to get involved in, maybe putting some pressure on the legislature to make some movement. I think that maybe the state, knowing that that is a possibility, maybe they won't want the embarrassment of losing a lawsuit.
So that, and to be clear too, the primary litigator, he spoke regarding the McCleary, and the discussion ended up going around, how do we feel like we could, because his whole presentation was around special education funding, and the lack thereof, and the fact that every single need, right? And as you so clearly pointed out, right, 8 to 10 students, their needs are $1.4 million. That is still a requirement under McCleary to pay that. Yet they are in conflict with their own rule when they say we are required to give the student education. However, if they go above that 15% cap, we're not actually required anymore. And so I actually
laid out like that, but it makes, even when you say that, I'm just like, is this thing nailed down?
So I actually approached the litigator and I said, because when he was mentioning that, the question came up, like, how do we fight that? And he said, you could either go by committee, you can get a dozen schools together that have a strong use case, that are using safety net, that have above the cap, that are going through that. But the problem is what the state will end up doing is they'll end up playing whack-a-mole, right? You have 12 targets. You can always say, oh, well, they'll pick the one thing that this one district didn't do, but all the other districts did. And then they'll whack that one down. And then somebody else will bring something else up and they'll say, oh, well, you did this part wrong, but all the other ones did. So he actually recommended that if you can find a single district that we can be backed by a nonprofit from a financial standpoint, right? Because big law firms aren't cheap. But if you can find a single district that meets that criteria and that has a very strong paper trails, that has very strong recordings of what's going on, we could have a case. And so that's where I approached him and said, I would love to talk. I gave him my card, and then we will, like I said, early ideas, early discussions, but I figure if anybody could do it, it's worth a shot.
Yeah, and I guess I would argue we do the documentation for safety net really well.
Yeah.
I mean, probably better than anybody.
And that's the thing is if there's the paper trail there and it is all clean, like the whole thing is that there is such an undeniable, it's just undeniable for the state to look at, like,
Yeah.
wow, you do have a 20.7% of population, and you are using this much safety net, and you're using this much resources. And so they can't play whack-a-mole. They can't go around. They say, if one district is suffering by this, that is one district too many, because it does not align with funding every student.
And I would say most of the formulas in the special ed funding formula, they work well for us, if not for the cap.
Yep.
If the cap were just removed,
the
model would work fine for us, and probably for most districts.
It's good to know.
Whoops. So this is just a summary. This is all general fund. Our budget was for 39.3 million this year in expenditures. We're forecasting to be at 39.2, even with all that's going wrong. Not wrong. I would not argue that it's wrong. I would argue that everything that we're spending in special ed is over budget. We're still, with everything else we're doing, we're basically flat to budget on expenditures. We're gonna have a little bit of a reduction in revenue due to the enrollment miss. And there's probably about, I'm just putting in a buffer of about $400,000 of unforeseen extra hours and costs and sub costs that are hard to forecast, but based on past trends. So with that, starting with the beginning fund balance of 450, revenue of 41.3, expenditures of 39.6, forecasting an ending fund balance of about 2.15, which is 5.4%, which isn't 7%. But I guess I would, in context, looking at, this is a slide that I've kind of presented throughout the years. It is tracking the fund balance percentages for all the districts around us and some key districts in the state. And, you know, if Arlington peaked out at 16%, they're forecast to be at 3% at the end of this year. Darrington, small district, doing okay. Everett down to 5% by the end of this year. Lake Stevens down to 5%. Lakewood was at 26%. They're going to be spent down to 12% by the end of this year. Marysville, their budget is to be at -8%, and they're in binding condition with the state, and they're having to, everybody sees them on the news. Monroe staying pretty flat. Mukilteo had a peak of 18. They're going to be down to 3% at the end of this year. Snohomish down to 8%. Sultan down to 4%. Seattle, their budget has them ending this year at 2% fund balance. Lake Washington was at 25. They're going to be down to 7. Spokane, probably, I guess I would argue, a little easier on the east side where there's not all the crazy regionalization problems over there. Tacoma down to 5%, Bellingham down to 6, Olympia down to 3, Edmonds down to 5. The fact that, I mean, I don't know that I see anybody growing their fund balance this year. There's some that are staying flat, but I think everybody is flat or losing significant fund balance just this year, and have lost a lot over the last 4 years. And for us to be able to be in a point where we're going to be growing our fund balance to 5.4% and be at over $2 million, I mean, I just, everybody here, I think, is doing a tremendous job of trying to manage the environment that's been handed to us. Another piece I don't know if they talked about at your guys' session, but inflation for utilities and just the overhead costs of running a school district. They use that same funding model of IPD to increase the funding for those things. And they increased it, you know, by 2.9% or whatever. Our insurance alone went up by $150,000 this year, and they increased our funding for that by about $3,000. So, I mean, districts are swimming against a huge tidal wave of inflation that the state's not even coming close to offsetting over the last couple of years also. The last slide is just kind of an overview. It's very challenging statewide to grow fund balances. We're doing a good job executing the majority of our budget controls. Special education continues to be a challenge, but I guess I would argue that maybe we're controlling it as well as we can. And maybe there's a few things we can do better, but it's harder to control than most people think. Enrollment slightly below budget, but it's still increasing. Enrollment miss was offset by cost reductions, and inflation is a little overwhelming. And so 5.4% is our forecast. And that went longer than I thought, but I thought it was a while.
No, it was great. I mean, we're actually still right on schedule, but before I go to the board and ask for questions, Dr. I don't have you on my screen, but I just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to add. Not that you need to, but
Right.
we've been doing a lot of talking, and I can't see if you're trying to talk or not.
No, I just want to add one thing, and that is, you know, we spent a lot of time last year talking about special education and processes, and certainly we had the WASDA report come in, and so I do want to report to the board that you know, those processes have been put in place, and despite that, it doesn't mean that the challenges and the requests and actually the staffing needs aren't there. And so I feel like we've corrected and implemented something consistent among the schools, but we're still sort of coming to the same conclusion.
Thanks, Dr. M. Board, do you have anything that you want to add?
Last thing is it is Granite, what I kind of alluded to it earlier, it is Granite Falls versus the state. Right, effectively in this, or the issue of funding, right? I promise you, we are just trying to make sure that everybody has the funds that they need to get this done. And this is not, we need to look at this as it's a problem where we can band together to fix it instead of pointing fingers. So I'll leave it at that.
I'll add one, if I could add one other thing. We know that one of our surrounding districts is in binding condition. We expect a lot more districts to be in binding condition at the end of this year.
Do you want to just talk real quick about what binding conditions?
Binding condition, if you end your school year with a negative fund balance, or if you build a budget for the next school year that has a negative fund balance, you become in binding condition. Before this year, I believe the number is 2 school districts in the history of Washington have been in binding condition. Right now, I think there's 3 and
3 in our ESD.
3 in our ESD. To my knowledge, binding condition means that the district and OSPI have to agree on a plan to get a positive fund balance. This is fairly new, and the thing that I heard yesterday on my finance call is that OSPI is actually putting together a committee because they think there's going to be such a huge amount of binding condition districts in the future that they need to come up with a more scheduled process for how to deal with it when a school district goes into binding condition. Some districts are able to borrow from their future. You know, Marysville, our neighboring district, thinks that they'll be they had a double levy failure. Really hard to recover from a double levy failure. So they are in this deep hole because of a double levy failure. And they think that life will be much better in 2 years. So their plan, to the best of my knowledge, is to try and survive this year and next year. And then they think in 2 years, they'll be much better. So they're doing things to kind of borrow from their future to pay for the now. And they've got to adhere to that plan and monitor that plan, report out on that plan and succeed with that plan. And if they don't, I'm not completely sure what happens because it's such a rare thing. And I think that's why their OSPI is putting together this committee to try and put a process in place for dealing with these districts that are going to be in binding condition.
Let me say exactly what you said, but just in a little bit different way. And then I promise I'm going to end on a positive note because even I am feeling like, the unfortunate reality of binding conditions is that the state or a group of people that have no connection to the district, right, don't have to sit here in front of the district justifying and talking about their desires and their dreams for the future, are not elected by the community, really have no ownership to the community, large in part, essentially get to make the financial decisions for the district, and the board is essentially powerless to do anything. I heard that our neighboring district that they're going to completely stop all athletic programs throughout the entire district, every single program. And they're going to remove every single librarian from the entire district on top of some other things. And that wasn't even necessarily going to get them to all the way that they needed to go. It's just a really, really bad situation, right? And it's something that none of us want. So again, when I talk to people in the community, they're like, why are you guys doing this? It's because none of us want to basically cede control of what we're trying to do here to someone that doesn't have really any ownership or responsibility to the community, right? They don't care about our culture and stuff. However, with that said, positive note. One of the things that I try to do at WASDA, again, I love communicating with other school board directors around the state. And whenever I sat at a table, I was like, hey, just out of curiosity, are you planning to grow your fund balance this year? Just because I was just curious, right? And with zero exceptions, with absolutely zero exceptions. No, either the response was a chuckle, and they were like, "No, we're spending our fund balance to stay afloat right now," or no, but we think we're going to be flat. No one said that they were going to grow their fund balance, and no one was even auspicious enough to say, I'm going to grow my fund balance to the largest it's been in 4 years. And that is what we're trying to do. And that is actually what we're still forecast to do, even at a 5.4% fund balance, which I know is less than the 7% that we need to do, but we're doing it. And on top of that, and Dr. M, feel free to interrupt me if I'm wrong, even after having to lay off some paraeducators and do some really tough things over the summer, everyone that was still available and wanted a job, we've brought back, right? Am I correct? Am I correct in that?
That is correct.
And on top of that, we're still saving money. We're still doing the things. And it dawns on me that I guess I haven't said or acknowledged or thanked Marshall, you, Dr. Mills, Dr. Mans, Dr. M, the team to do that. You guys have, you really picked up the ball from the board, like, yo, we got to get control of this. And this was before Marysville, right? Marysville just brings it. Oh gosh, I said their name. I apologize. I apologize. I love Marysville. I lived there for 3 years. There's even before that. So I guess I just want to say that we're doing it, right? That we're doing the unthinkable. We're doing the thing that I couldn't find one school board in the entire state of Washington, granted, small sample set, I didn't argue everybody, is trying to do, certainly not to the size of what we're doing and having the success we are. So keep up the good work. I really, really, really appreciate the help. And I'm excited that we are going to be able to be in more of a stable situation that, I can see the better days right on the other side of the mountain. So thank you.
I will say I'm sleeping better this year than I was last year.
All right, board, anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 3C. And by the way, Eric, when I say board, I should always remember to turn to you too. I'm sorry. If you ever have anything to say, feel free to tap me. Board reports, quickly go through it. WIA.
Yeah, the only update here is there's going to be some adjustments in our conference situation. So our AD Helgeson is working on figuring out, there's a few options of remaining in the Emerald Sound Conference, but there's a lot of schools that are changing out of that as they readjust for 1A, 2A, et cetera. There's the Nisqually League, which we could join, and then there's also which is a District 1. So that's up with like Linden Christian, Blaine, Mount Baker, so on and so forth. So there's some evaluation to do. Marshall, I noticed you were on the thread back and forth. I don't know what our next steps are to try to help identify which conference that we'd want to go into, but.
Yeah, I know that Mr. Helgeson was going to try and get a committee together of coaches and athletes, and just kind of, there's benefits and detriments to both.
Yeah.
I mean, going north would be way more convenient for parents and traffic and all those things. But they're pretty competitive on north. Going south would be more of comparable competition, but everything is, I mean, Tacoma and Seattle, and trying to get parents to go to events is almost impossible.
Yeah.
So difficult choice for sure.
Yep. Absolutely. So,
just a question to you or Marshall, is there, I'm not 100% sure how the decision is made, like who finally stamps, it might be Mr. Helgeson, and that's fine. But I guess, to what extent are we outreaching to parents and saying, hey, even we're contemplating this. What do you think? Is there any part of that? Maybe you don't know. Maybe that's a tough question, and sorry for catching you off guard.
I think that's something could put out a poll to parents, and I think that's a good idea. Like we did with the stadium, we did the turf and asked, here's our options. What do you guys think? And we had pretty good participation in that. So maybe polling.
Yeah.
Parents. I think I can bring that up to the high school.
I think Dr. M was going to say something. Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was going to just say that when we switched conferences a few years ago, that was ultimately brought to the board for that approval. But I do think there was a lack of parental input on that. And I think we heard about it the first couple of seasons. So I think it really is important to get a committee together that includes a variety of stakeholders, athletes, but also parents and coaches.
Yeah, again, I don't know the process or the timeline and, but I would love to fill a shirt that, I mean, whatever we do, there's obviously someone that's going to be unhappy, but I would love to feel that whatever decisions recommended to the board and we do, whatever the largest amount of parents or athletes or students or whatever said, yeah, this is what we think the best. And ultimately, again, we're doing what's best for them. I've got one of the best communicators I know sitting next to me, who I know that will put it all over Facebook and stuff like that. And I guarantee that this is one of those things that gets a lot of people talking. So, whatever we could do, I think would be best.
Just to add, I think one of the sad things is that Solton, it looks like they're gonna be moving to 2A.
Yeah.
I think there were like 4 or 5 students over the cap, so they're gonna move to 2A, and South Whitby's moving down to 2B. So the 3 of us who have been together with seeming like forever, we're gonna be in separate divisions now. I mean, we'll still be able to play non-league games against each other and stuff, but I mean, gosh, I wish there was a way for the 3 of us just to find a way to stay together in the same conference.
Yeah.
So forgive my ignorance, but we're changing because of growth? Is that why we have to change?
So we have the option to change it. We could still stay within the Emerald Sound Conference. So we could still stay in there. To Marshall's point, the two other schools that have been in that conference with us the longest, and they're both moving out. So they are moving out. And so it's still an option to stay. I will say I've noticed traveling to games within the Emerald Sound Conference, right? There's still some pretty tricky places to get to, right? There's still Bellevue, there's still Seattle. It's not, it's a far cry from these country roads out here.
Yeah.
So it's still not, it's still challenging. So yeah, it'd be great to get the input on south, north, what would be the best options. But yeah, there's still stay status quo, we can stick within the original conference.
So Dr. M, just on that, I would imagine that at some point you don't have to answer now, no catching off guard, but at some point you'll come back and say, maybe present, here's the plan to get that engagement or something along those lines. I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's just what.
We'll have Tony Helgeson come and present similar to what Joey Johnson did a few years ago and present what his findings are and what ultimately that committee's recommendation would be to you.
And then how they saw that voice and what the feedback was,
Correct.
all that. Okay, perfect. Enough said. All right. Moving on, community report. Director Kincaid, do you have anything?
The only thing that I wanted to report is just passing on the message from the boosters that there is a family game night on Friday at Monte Cristo. And it's board games and all kinds of games, and all families are invited to come play. So
Outstanding. All right. I'll make my ledge report really quick because we've talked about it a number of times in reference to the budget that was the governor's budget. Hold on, somehow my email is all weird now. There it is. But just a quick couple of things, a special ed cap from 15 to 17.25, which would help, as Marshall said. Paid teacher residencies, a 3.7% increase in IPD, which in my opinion is not nearly enough. Benefits for contracted bus drivers. So again, this is just his proposed operating capital budget. There is no guarantee that one or any of these things will get passed or what they'll look like when they get to the end of it. But if you said, Carl, it's a 2.25% increase in sped or nothing, I would say, well, I guess I'll take it. So there is some help there. But the other thing is I have a meeting with the WASDA Legislative Committee in January. It's a 2-day meeting where I'm going to drive down to Lacey, where we'll start talking about our advocacy platform for this year and how we're going our day on the Hill and kind of how we're going to start attacking some of these things, specifically funding, but and also other things this year. I will say honestly, there's not a lot of optimism that there's going to be a big change. It's a short session, and typically in a short session, they only do little tweaks to the budget. They don't do these big sweeping things, which breaks my heart. Doesn't mean that we aren't going to still try to swing for the fences, but that is the reality of the situation. So I want to make sure I set expectations correctly and stuff like that. So that's really all I've got. Any questions for me on the ledger report? Okay. All right. Moving on to item 4A on the superintendent's update on the superintendent search. We have our Northwest Leadership Academy here, who's going to present on it. Yes, please stand up.
Thanks for having us here. I'm Mark Ben and this is Wayne Robertson. We're leading the search, and then Laurel Browning over here is just the recently retired superintendent at Burlington Edison. She's shadowing us because she's going to join our group and be part of our group. So thanks for having us back, and we'll try to make.
So you're saying I see a retired superintendent here who, I'm just joking.
We turned that rock over.
You saw where I was going there. I'm sorry.
But we have an agenda. I don't know if you have the agenda. Did you guys get that put up on the screen or not?
Oh, yeah.
Part of the board packet. If you could put the agenda up, that'd be great. But I know you have a breakdown, and this is good news. This is pretty much the halfway point. About a month from now, the position will close on the 12th of January. It'll close, and right now I'm just going to break it down. You have it in front of you, I hope, on the report. But I wanted to break it down to the reality is that we normally have a lot of applications being turned in right at the last minute. So the applicants are kind of like middle school kids. They wait till the last minute to turn everything in, right, Ariel?
Not you. You're early.
Not you, though.
Superstar.
I want to make a comment. I was at the WASDA conference as well. And the thing that impressed me, and I've been to a lot of them, I used to chase boards around and do that too, but the number of student reps at the conference this year was so impressive. We sat at tables with a lot of them. And if you get a chance to ever go to that, that's really a good opportunity for you. There's sessions just for the student reps too to do that. So right now, I'm going to update this. Right now, we have 5 completed applications. And like I said, we normally see a flurry at the end. For a search like this, that's a lot for us. We've gone into this stage before and had none. So we've had 5 completed applications. We talked before about there's going to be a broad scope, a wide net that we're going to cover when we send out the application, but also the brochure goes out to over 3,500. But right now you have some people that have applied from Washington, from Iowa, and from Oklahoma. So you're going to get candidates from not only Washington State, but from all across the country. We've targeted about 35 people for this search, but we've sent out 120 applications and brochures, which is a large number. But if we have them on our list, if we work with them before, we will send it out. So out of those 120, we probably heard from maybe a third of them back, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot. That's 40 people. So out of those 120, just to break down, 30 of those 120 are current Washington State superintendents. They're currently practicing superintendents in our state. Out of those 120, 16 of them are from out of state, from we talked about Iowa. We have international school superintendents. We have a few of those that we've sent applications to, but Oregon, California, Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, Wyoming, Idaho, a broad spectrum of candidates throughout the country. And I know Josh was from Idaho too, when you hired him. 4 of them, 120 are former superintendents, like Laurel over here, are former superintendents. She's not included in this list. So. And the Washington State, usually where we get in districts this side, most of the candidates that we send out applications to our current directors or assistant superintendents in other districts. And we've sent out 47 to that, and got a lot of interest. We've also sent them out to out-of-state people, 14 from out-of-state, Florida, Texas, Utah, Connecticut, New Mexico, Washington, DC, all over the map. And so, again, we cast a wide net. And so I think realistically, when we get together, we've talked about this before, you can expect at least 15 applications that we'll receive. We'll get those to you before we do our screening meeting and do that. We have 9 principals too that have been sent out applications and the brochure. Breaking them down by gender, we have out of the 120, 35 are women, 85 are men. 39 of these potential candidates have their doctorate already. 17 are minorities of the 120, 17, which is normal pretty much for our searches. You know, we African-American, Hispanic, Asian, that sort of thing. The one thing I wanted to bring to your attention though is we're doing an online survey right now, right, Melanie? And we only have 87 responses from your school district. In a district like this, we would expect at least 150, maybe double that. So I guess I'd ask you, not the board so much, but the people in the room with our PR people, to get the word out, because we'll probably close that down about a week before the position closes. So it'll shut down not far after you get back from winter break. So we would hope to have you be able to look at about 150 or more people that responded. So right now it's only 87. So and we know we have no Latinx, Hispanic responses at all yet in Spanish. So we can do better than that, I think, and do that. So that's a breakdown of where we're at right now. We do, there's been some strong interest in the position. We've fielded a lot of calls. We've talked to a lot of people. I think there'll be a really good pool for you guys to choose from. And that's what you want. Our job is to make your job hard, right? So
Yeah.
don't forget that.
How many people did the online survey go out to?
Well, it went out to your whole district, right, Melanie? You put it out to.
Right, we put it out to the district students, parents, plus community, so I can pull numbers if I pull of how many opened versus how many took, so, I mean.
So there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
Just from my knowledge, right, I'm part of a sort of like a House of Representatives, so to speak, at work for account executives, and we do a lot of surveys, and to get a comprehensive survey result or a representative survey result, we expect 43% of respondents. Sounds like we are way far away from that. I'm not going to expect 40%.
Peter.
And I don't think we're going to get 43%, but I'm sure 87, assuming it went out to, it sounds like everybody. I mean, we're talking at points of a percent.
But you advertise it, but they have to go onto your website to get into the survey, right?
Send them a link.
You
Right.
send them a link out,
The
right?
link that was sent out,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
you
Yeah.
don't have to necessarily go.
It's not, it's pretty common to send it out multiple times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't be afraid to send it out a couple
Yeah.
of weeks right before the break and maybe right after.
Yeah. And I'll be clear, it's not getting 43% of people trying during an election is impossible. So, like, I'm not expecting that. However, just remember, like, we are asking for your opinion, your feedback. Like, we want to know. So please, because nobody likes to have some sort of a result and then be like, why'd they do that? It's like, well, did you give any feedback, right? Please, feedback. We want to read, we want to understand. Not everybody's going to get necessarily exactly what they want, but we want to trying to run a democratic organization, right? So.
What you'll find most useful when you look at when we put this report is the written responses.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's a 3 or 4 sections in the survey for written responses, so you can reply to that. So we have, just looking at the breakdown, you have some students that have responded. The big group is your parents right now. Some staff have responded, some administrators have, but the big group right now is your parents have. So the word must be getting out probably to that way too.
Maybe we can get you the link, Ariel, and you can, like some of your fellow students at Crossroads, you say, hey, you want to talk about what type of superintendent you think we need? You know, click on this or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can make it easy for you. Maybe get you a link or something like that that you could afford. Yeah.
Anyhow, after it closes on the 12th, we come in and we have a screening meeting. I'm gonna let Wayne take over from here. You can talk about the process from there, how that's gonna look, but that's coming up about 10 days after the job closes, and we'll talk about that. So.
Can I ask just one question before you transition? Is it possible, and I don't know the line between, you know, what we do and what you help us craft as far as communications, that's a little blurred. So when I ask you, I'm not, you know, I'm kind of, I don't know if this is something you would do, but is there a way, because I've been asked a couple of times, where are you guys at with that superintendent thing? Is there a way to like condense this in like a little snippet with everything that you just kind of said? I mean, even bullet points. Bullet points are always easy for me to say, and then we could just include the link, and then maybe Melanie send it out again and post it on Facebook and give it to Ariel and stuff like that. Do you guys do that? Would we do that, or?
We can certainly provide some content, but usually it's your.
Yeah.
It's yours.
Okay.
You guys to do that.
But we can give you some.
Maybe a good way to kind of revive, get some interest in it, say, hey, listen, you know, we're at 5, we're feeling good about this. We think we got this, and you know, hey, if you want input, here it is, and something like that.
For that is to keep it moving on that superintendent search button on their website.
Yeah.
So people get kind of programmed to go in there whenever they want something, because that's what they can see.
Yeah.
Right now, you can put a link to the survey on there pretty easily.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable with that, Dr. M, like getting something like that together?
Yeah, that does sound good.
Perfect.
I'll go one step further and you can say,
I wouldn't shy away. Actually, I'll leave this up to the powers that be, but I wouldn't shy away from putting, like, find out how many people it was sent out to and put, we have 87 out of however many responses. Cause I know it's just like when you vote, right? Nah, it doesn't matter if I vote. If you look and you see that, you're like, holy cow, like
25%. Yeah.
yeah, like barely anybody's responded to this. Like I got to get in there and actually give my input because nobody, you know, like. So.
You can do better. You can do better. You will. You will. You'll these matter of create a sense of urgency, really. You know, people really want to be involved. And they shouldn't be able to come up to you after it's all done and say, we didn't have a chance to be involved because we did the focus groups already, we've got the survey, and then the next part, what he's going to talk about, other ways for people.
Yeah.
So the other thing on the survey responses, if you can get people that have affiliations, so if you're like your booster club or your PTAs or your building administrators or your union leaders, to get their people, say, we need to get our voice into this process. That's kind of where you get numbers. And like Bart mentioned, the student groups, the districts say, some of the districts that get really big numbers or percentage, get really high percentage from their students. So the teacher leaders that work with those groups can kind of make those quite an assignment, but almost an activity that the students get involved. And then the student liked it. And you did have good participation in the focus group sessions. Numbers were good and engagement was really good. So it's not like there's no voices out there. So good. So that's kind of Mark's was kind of a summary of the work that we've been doing in terms of recruiting and outreach and processing with people. The next kind of several items, and they kind of run together, are kind of what's next. And so as mentioned, the position closes on the 12th. Right around the closing time, we need to figure out a process where we can get the completed applications, make them available to you. And we've talked a little bit with Melanie about that. And so, you know, you've got a good window between the 12th and the 22nd before we do the screening meeting. So that'll give you plenty of time to read through the files. We're thinking there'll be 15, 18, maybe 20 completed files. You'll want to pay close attention to them, read through them, and get a sense of them. Some of them take longer than others. Some board members, you know, do it differently, but we want you to have access to all the files so that you know, overly influencing that process. Their applications.
Yeah, one thing on that, what we tell boards is if you're going through those files, read the written part. There's 2 prompts in there that are to what you set up in your brochure as the characteristics and qualifications. Read how they address that. And then, of course, the letter of introduction. You can tell right away if they've done their homework on your district from just reading that. So read the written part. The other part, the resume and all that, we take care of all that.
Pretty fast. So, and then on the 22nd, we'll be here and you'll have had access to the files. We'll do a summary of our vetting, give you kind of a breakdown of who says what, who believes what kind of experiences. So that will kind of condense it a little bit, not meant to take the place of any work that you do, but just to complement and organize it a little bit, make the discussion and the deliberations go a little faster. We suggest that at the preliminary level, you don't do a lot of vetting. If you know somebody, you want to call that district and say, because those applicants may not have had time to inform everybody that they're an applicant.
So is the 22nd a regular board meeting or an executive session?
Executive.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to make sure. Sorry. I should have been looking at that side.
It's a special board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's gonna take a few hours.
It's gonna take a couple hours at least. It'll take a couple hours.
And we could do it in the evening, right?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just make it sure.
Got time to figure that out.
Sure.
And then, if you're inclined to make contacts about the candidates, I'd save that for the finalists. Then we would actually encourage you. But with the semifinalists, it's a little early in the process. So then on the 22nd, we'll reach consensus as to who you want to invite back for the semifinalists, the preliminary interviews. And we're recommending 6, kind of depending on what the breakdown of the pool is. You might get a clean break at 6. You might not. You might want to have an alternate. We'll have time to talk about that and we'll figure that out. And then once you get those names, I'll set up the schedule. We'll set up the schedule and get those people scheduled for their preliminary interviews. We will do a little bit of logistical work to get set up for the day of the interviews, which is January 27. That's a Saturday. Probably start about 8 o'clock, kind of depending on whether we do 6 or 7 or whatever it is. If we do 6, it works out well to do 4 in the morning, take a break for lunch, just have something simple brought in so we don't have to go anywhere. Take half hour, 45 minutes for lunch, come back in the afternoon, do 2 more, and then deliberate. And then that deliberation is an executive session. Actually, I think all of your you decided you were going to do it that way. So that's a good decision and that'll work well.
And I want to say this isn't to take public voice out of this. It's just because at that point still their boards or other districts might not know that they have a superintendent that's looking. So we're trying to not discourage anyone who's potentially interested and, doesn't want to.
What that does is increase the likelihood that somebody will apply.
Yeah.
They don't have to have it out there before their whole community that they're an applicant. That's a little bit of an incentive. So we might pick up a couple of people that way and they might be the ones that move forward. So that's a good thing. So on the Saturday, the 27th, we'll have to figure out where those interviews are going to take place. Could be right here, whatever you think. And then we'll help you out with interview questions, but you can massage them and work them over and get them to where you want them to be. Particularly usually there are a dozen questions or so. That works out about right for a 50-minute interview. And we'll tie the questions to the challenges and opportunities that we developed in the brochure. And I usually start that out with a draft, and you can kind of work it over from there. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for that. And then after the last interview on that Saturday, then we'll deliberate again, and we want to take it down to 3, perhaps an alternate, possibly 4 finalists, but most likely 3. And we'll get them set up, get them invited, make sure they know what the day is going to look like, and get that all figured out. And that's when you could get involved in the vetting. By then we'll know quite a bit about those people because you'll have had information from us, and you'll have seen them in an interview. And we kind of continue to vet the people that are moving forward after they've been identified. We kind of work that all the way throughout the process. You'll have lots of information. So there'll be executive session for that whole day, finishing up with that executive session. And then we also notify the people that aren't being invited for an interview. So we take care of that piece of it for us. And that's a kind of a way for them to thank them for their application, give them a little feedback on the process. So if they take another run at it later, they can learn. And that's kind of good closure and public relations for the district. So we did make an adjustment, remember, to the dates for the finalists. We had originally scheduled the 29th, the 30th, and the 1st. And then we figured out the 30th wasn't so good because of some staff activities or something like that. And Carl and I connected as he was on a dead run past the table where I was down at the WASDA conference. And he says, we're okay on that calendar date, gotta go. That was about the extent of I think we did get a handshake in there.
I think there was, yes.
He nodded, I saw he nodded.
I think we got a fist bump at some other time. Anyway, so I think now we're on the 28th.
No,
What is it?
I think that's right.
Oh, okay, because
Pick out the 31st.
We took out the
took out the 31st. Okay, so this is right then.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an
Monday-
adjustment
Monday,
from
Tuesday.
what
Yeah,
we
that's
originally had. So on the, let's see, Mark, you're gonna talk about the final process. Okay, so that's the calendar. And then the announcement of who the superintendent is will happen on the 2nd in a special board meeting that morning.
Yes.
Finish it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Are there any questions on any of that?
There is a couple points here we want to make. When we get to the semifinal interviews, we want to have the contract and the salary done. And because we want to present that to the candidates, so if they are finalists, they know what they're gonna get. There's no last minute haggling to get through that.
Carl's got that very well under control.
Sure he does. Yeah, good. And then the other thing, do you remember we do a third party background check for your 3 finalists? So it covers you, it covers us. We check their finances, we check their resume, we check their online presence, we check their criminal past too, if they have any. We haven't found any that do. So the final, when they're in the district for a day, and then Melanie will help with this, maybe Josh will too, but we need to set up a schedule like we did for the focus groups. We need to have them meet with different groups throughout the day. And it goes through the day. They usually come in here at 7 in the morning. They'll meet with one of us and we go through the schedule, what a day looks like. And usually a board member comes in at the start of the day and greets them and thanks them for being here and that. Part of the day could include time with Josh, could include time, hopefully does, with Melanie and Paris too, and they can give you some input too. But throughout the day, whatever group is meeting with a candidate, they'll get a chance to provide input back to you. And there'll be, hopefully we can set up an online online system where they can get in and get on the computer and give feedback back to you, what they thought, what are their questions about each candidate that they meet them throughout the day. So that's a good way for a lot of people to be involved. So they spend a full day in the district. They start at 7 in the morning and about 5 in the afternoon. Usually what we do is to have a dinner between the board and the candidate. And it's up to you, but if the candidate has a spouse, oftentimes they'll invite the spouse. I'll be honest with you, oftentimes the spouse will help them as much as anything to get the job too. So, but anyhow, you invite, if they want to bring the spouse, you usually cater that in and don't go out to a restaurant where you have to depend on that from 5 to 6. Then at 6 o'clock, you have a community meeting, similar to what we did before here with the focus groups. And the boards, we want the board to be there. We want the board to see how they respond to the community. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can do free for all, where anything can be asked by the community members. So Wayne and I will facilitate that. But what we found lately has been very effective is the community will submit their questions prior. There'll be an all call out to the community to submit questions. And then Wayne or I will read the questions to the candidate and the candidate will answer those questions in front of the community. And you can see how the person responds to those questions. It's a little more structured, but from past experience, it can get pretty free for all, or one or two people can totally dominate all the questions when you're meeting with the community, because we usually only have about 45 minutes for them to meet with the community. And then after that, we go back into executive session at the end of the day and meet with the board. And basically you can ask the candidate within reason, within legal reason, anything that you want. You don't have to ask the same candidate question that you ask each candidate. And so you meet with them for about an hour, then you deliberate every day up until Thursday, the last day, and then you go increase your executive session and you go into deliberations. And the idea is you'll come to consensus on who you want as your next superintendent. We already mentioned that you'd announce it the next morning, but the day is pretty structured. At the end of the day, when you meet with them as a board, it's usually without the student there, sorry. But it's an executive session and it's, you can ask, Bill, you can ask one question to one candidate, totally different question to another candidate. It doesn't have to all be the same. So we go through that. We've got the contract and the salary figured out. We've done a third-party background check. And then you make the announcement through a roll call vote. And I think you've done that before, or maybe you haven't. But through a roll call vote, and you've got a new superintendent. We've already talked to them and we're assured that they will accept your offer. And then at the next board meeting, you would actually formally approve the contract. And then they would start the job July 1st. Does that make sense?
It does. Can I ask one thing? Just because even as you're talking, I'm looking at my schedule and I'm like, okay, I need to this day and stuff. Is it possible to get a schedule that goes a little bit deeper with like time slots and stuff like that? And maybe an asterisk of, board needed here, non-quorum. So like, one or two, just so that, we all have 9 to 5. I don't, only one of us actually saves lives for a job. And so, that way, maybe if I can't be there, I can say, hey, Peter, they want, can you do this introduction on this day? And we can maybe share the load a little bit. And if you give me time slots, then I can really get deep.
Yeah, we can do it. They're really only the start of the day, and then you're not involved in the day at all until 5 o'clock. And then you have dinner together, and then after that, there's a community meeting, and you just don't make sure no more than 2 of you sit together at the community meeting, and then you do executive session. But we certainly can do that.
Yeah.
The start of the day is just have a cup of coffee and just how you doing. It's very informal, but leaves a good impression with the candidate that there will be a board member there, and to greet them and thank them for taking part in it. Search.
Yeah, if you give me that schedule too, the other thing I'm worried about is if we all have conflicts, I'm like, oh gosh, none of us could be there, right? So
it's okay if you can't be there, but we would suggest if you're not going to be there for one, you probably wouldn't want to be there for.
Yeah, what we usually do is send a couple of sample schedules that have been used in other districts, because every district's a little different. And then probably knowing Josh and you and kind of say, okay, we want to do this and this, or this schedule works for us,
Yeah, well then I would, let's sit down and let's make that schedule, because the sooner I have that, the better I'll feel about, okay, I've got all my bases covered.
Get a schedule to you.
Okay. Board, any questions? I'm not rushing you. Is there anything else?
We're done. We've actually I've enjoyed the meeting, actually.
we're not done yet. We're gonna stick around, talk to Carl after.
I sent you a text, just 5 minutes after, if you don't mind. I enjoy your company so much. I just wanted to hang with you a little bit more. Yeah.
I didn't want you to say goodbye.
I'm just gonna wish you Merry Christmas.
Not yet. You can do it in a bit. All right. Moving on, items 5A, items from the floor. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? All right. Moving on to unfinished business. We have none. So now moving on to new business 7A. These are some new policy adoptions that had some significant changes to them So that's why these four are here. There's some other ones that really have more kind of grammar that I put in the consent agenda. So we thought apropos to kind of talk about this. So 7A, first reading to adopt policy 2401, financial education, mastery-based learning and credit. Is that you, Dr. M?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd love to visit just a couple of minutes on this one. This is a raw policy. We have work that we would do between now and the second reading. And we're asking for this approval of a first reading tonight. This is really to benefit our Open Doors program in order to give credit for those students who are working, who can then demonstrate mastery over their day-to-day finances with a rubric that we would set up. But our principal, Crossroads and Open Doors, is really has made a strong request to get this passed so that she can offer this to the Open Doors students. Now, the way it's written is it's sort of, it could be for all of our high schools. That's the work that I think Bridget and Dr. Mans and myself would work on between the first reading and the second reading. But it is somewhat of a time issue, as Bridget is thinking that there's some funding opportunities that she would like to take advantage of if we could get it passed at our January meeting.
Any questions for it? This is, Dr. M, something I fully support. I guess I just want to ask the question, Joe, just so I know, because this can be, if I understand correctly, this credit can be used in place of another course. So, instead of taking, I don't know, science, they could use as mastery-based credit in lieu of that, correct? And I guess because the way it's, at least with the way the procedure's written, it says that, and I was like, well, how does that align with the state standards on stuff? So and I know this is rough, but I'm fine with passing the first reading, and you give me that feedback, as part of our next reading. But
yeah, and our intention is not for it to replace anything. This is really to give those students who are 20 or 21 or 23, who are trying to get to their GED, and they are living life and they're managing. And again, we could line up a rubric to show that, yes, they are working, they're managing money, and giving them credit for that. And it's an unusual policy, and I've gone back and forth with Bridget on this a little bit, because I understand her desire to give credit for work while demonstrating this mastery, but in no way would we want it to replace something. And so that would be some of the massage that we do between now and the next meeting.
Yeah, and if we, so give me that feedback, and if it is, it's that, so that language is part of the procedure, but not the policy. And if we're doing something, really that significant, that needs to be part of the policy, right? And then we also need to make sure that, we can, and what that looks like or whatever. So, but like I said, I'm fine passing the first reading as long as we can maybe judge it a little bit before we do a final on it.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay. All right. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the first reading to adopt policy 2401, financial education, mastery-based learning and credit.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass unanimous. All right. First reading to amend policy 3207, prohibition of harassment, intimidation, or bullying. Doctor?
What I want to say about this is, thank goodness this has come, because this really gives greater expectations and greater information for everybody. So for the schools and what their roles are, what students and parents can look at for, I guess, guardrails. To me, these were the missing pieces when this was originally introduced. So I see this really clearing up a number of issues that not just our districts, but other districts have experienced when it comes to harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and that whole process.
Any questions for?
Recommended by OSPI.
By WASDA.
Okay.
Yeah. Like to make a motion that we pass the first reading to amend policy 3207, prohibition of harassment, intimidation, or bullying.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. All right. 3432 emergencies.
And this is also a WASDA policy. And truthfully, we have a great emergency operator manual, so we're right in line with what is introduced here, but it's something that they recommend all districts have. A policy that is recommended.
Okay. Board, any questions? Guys, go ahead.
Oh, I make a motion that we accept the first reading to amend policy 3432 emergency.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded by Director Ledoux. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. All right. First reading to amend policy 3520, student fees, fines, and charges. Go ahead, Dr. M.
And the significant piece in here is when it comes to damages, that it really is giving the district a little bit more authority of if a student has lost or willfully damaged something, what their rights are, what the district's rights are in terms of going after the family and the student. So you can see in that green paragraph, that's really the meat of the change.
Again, this is a WASDA recommended policy.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Board, any questions? Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the first reading to amend policy 3520 student fees, fines, and charges.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded by Director Dane. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda items, 8 of the agenda. There are additions. Yes. So I will need a formal motion if someone is comfortable making that to accept with the additions.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda with additions.
Motion was made to accept the consent agenda with the additions. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right. That brings us to the closing. We are going to adjourn at 7:52. I appreciate everyone coming out. Thank you, board.
Thank you.